Welcome back again to Crime and Media. I'm Dr. David Bugg, and today we're going to talk about the social construction of crime. In your readings this week, one of the things that really we need to be paying attention to is how crime is socially constructed and how the media helps shape the way social construction of crime, criminals, and the criminal justice system takes place. What we should think about is that when we talk about the social construction of crime and crime related issues, our opinions, socially speaking, can change throughout history and between cultures. So, in some countries, we may have different concerns about crime than in other countries. And so, here in the United States, when we start thinking about social construction, from a media standpoint, what we have to think about is how the media shapes our understanding of crime and crime issues. So we could think about it in terms of there are three questions that perhaps the media helps us in that social construction. The media helps us with issues about when crime takes place, where crime takes place is the second question, and by whom crime is committed. And related to that, we also have the issues of who are responsible for dealing with criminals. So the who question is particularly important for us as well in terms of constructing who are crime fighters, who are crime victims, and who are criminals themselves. So when, where, and who are going to be important for us over the course of this class. Now, when we look at, say, the last 35 years or so of crime issues in the United States, we can see that the media tends to focus on or give attention to specific problems more than others, to the point of creating epidemics of crime, as you will. Quite often, these epidemic sort of nature to certain crime events are taken completely out of context of larger social trends. And so it becomes hard for us to think about what has really been happening in terms of those crimes and what the media presents to us. In the 1980s, issues about drugs, for example, were very important from a media standpoint. It got people to tune in to the news, to TV shows, to give attention to sort of drug issues. And so television shows focused heavily on drug themes when talking about crime topics. Miami Vice, for example, was a particularly popular TV show in the 1980s and really sort of focused on drug related issues. A variety of popular movies also did the same thing. And coming out of a long history in the United States, drug users were depicted as burnouts and people who went on violent rampages after consuming drugs, um, and quite often not depicting the actual way drugs were being used. Especially when it came to issues of class and race, drugs were shown in such a way as to be um, a lower class problem when we look at um, certain TV depictions, often depicting minority groups, especially blacks, as a criminal element, with white heroes um, sort of taking on the dangers associated with this drug crime. In the 1990s, concern became increasingly focused on things like gang activity, a lot of youth related crime, especially in the 1990s, the rise of the sort of hyper violent juvenile offender. Um, and so daytime talk shows such as Maury Povich became consumed with these depictions of these tough teens um, taking on parents who couldn't control them, and it required tough love. So boot camps were featured a lot on these television shows. Um, Not really sort of taking into context issues like who boot camps were intended for, um, if boot camps were a viable option for rehabilitating teenagers, and it helped contribute to some of this idea that juveniles could be treated as adults and should be treated as adults when engaging in adult crimes, ignoring the developmental differences between teenagers and adults. Recently, since the turn of the century, and especially since 2001 and the events of 9/11, recently in the last decade and a half, concern amongst the American public for crime has focused heavily on terrorism. Um, so television shows like 24, NCIS, have given extra attention to the issue of terrorism as part of those television shows. Um, Sexual crimes have also been of particular concern, especially after the creation of the television show Law and Order Special Victims Unit, and the depiction of crimes of a sexual nature in that television show. And so these crimes have sort of dominated the crime and justice sort of depictions in popular media, both in terms of news shows, amongst others. But there are other crimes that bubble up that we give increasing importance to because they become popular. And so our concern may stem from a fictional account of a crime problem, and then that may capture our real world attention. Take, for example, the popular movie Taken, starring Liam Neeson, and its subsequent sequels. Taken depicts to us a crime problem associated with human trafficking. In it, Liam Neeson's character, his daughter, is kidnapped, and Liam Neeson vows to seek justice and rescue his daughter. And the justice he seeks is very retributive in nature. The individuals who have kidnapped his daughter are dispatched with particular depictions of violence as he goes after the Albanian human traffickers that are involved in a white slavery ring um, focused on white young women, of which Liam Neeson's daughter represents an American kidnapped by this group. Now, while human trafficking is certainly an important issue, and while public attention towards this topic is certainly important, one of the things that we have to recognize is that the media, especially in terms of this film, in the terms of Taken, helped actually create a lot of the concern that we see with the issue of human trafficking. So prior to the release of Taken, human trafficking was a crime that we were aware of and had certainly been depicted in the media in other places. It just hadn't captured the popular attention, but a very serious crime no less. Um, the film Taken actually takes some of its inspiration from real Albanian criminal groups that were operating in Europe in the early part of the 21st century. However, what the movie does is alter who are the victims of that crime and the location of where those crimes were taking place. Many Albanians that were engaged in human trafficking prior to the release of Taken had focused on Albanian children and were trafficking them to countries like Greece as part of sex tourism rings for wealthy businessmen from America Europe, parts of Asia, and other parts of the world, who would come to Greece on vacation and gain access to young children of Albanian descent for the terms of prostitution. Albanian criminals involved in this were victimizing their own ethnic and national groups by preying on Albanian immigrants scattered throughout Europe who were facing poverty and discrimination, and coming up with various sort of ways to take these children and traffic them, whether it was through the promise of a better life in another country or jobs. Albanian parents were releasing their children to the care of traffickers who were then trafficking those children mainly for purposes of the sex trade in Europe. While this particular instance should be of concern to us, creating a movie such as Taken, this storyline may not need to bring in our white protagonist in the form of Liam Neeson, as well as targeting his own daughter. This is what some folks in the comics field have called the issue of women in refrigerators, which refers to women being victims of crime, so the male protagonist has a reason to act. And so in Taken uses this concept of the female victim as the reason for our male protagonist to get involved and defend and protect the female victim in this case. And so this is part of the way we socially construct these crime issues. And so as you're conducting your readings this week and taking part in the discussion boards, be thinking about this issue. How does crime and its depictions change throughout time and also change between different cultures? For now, Dr. David Bugg signing off. Until next time on Crime and Media, take care.